I want to talk a little bit about file structure and file paths for your project. You all should be doing this already. It's really important to have a folder structure for your projects so you keep them neat and organized. In case something becomes unlinked, you know how to set up your project and how to relink files. And so I'm going to go up here to Animation Project 1. And inside of it, you can see I have folders for After Effects, Adobe Illustrator, footage, etc. So for After Effects folder, what I'm going to be saving in here is my After Effects save files. There's not going to be any extra assets in this folder. I'm not going to be putting anything that I create in any other program, just my After Effects save files. But for Illustrator and Photoshop, that's where I'm going to be putting my assets that I create. So if I make an illustration or take a picture in Photoshop, I'm gonna place it in here. Footage, that's where I like to put my movie files. So I've already dragged in my hand file that we're going to be rotoscoping over top of. I put it here in the footage file. And renders, of course, anything that comes out of After Effects will have here down in renders. Now, of course, you might have extra folders. You might have Maya or Cinema 4D, any other folders. Just go ahead and create a new folder here for whatever you're working in. Keep it nice and organized, sort of in this system of having your respective folders for different softwares. I think is a great way to do it. Okay, today I'm going to be showing you the process of rotoscoping. Rotoscoping is an easy way to start getting into 2D animation. It's the process of taking footage that we've already shot and then tracing over it in some sort of medium. In this case, digitally. We'll be tracing it over in Photoshop. And you might have seen the series, the Amazon series Undone. That uses rotoscoping. There's a well-known movie called Waking Life, and A Scanner Darkly. Both of those also use rotoscoping, and rotoscoping has become much more popular throughout the years. It's a method that I use a lot in my own animation. Unfortunately, it is frame by frame, and so it takes a little bit more time, and it's a little bit tedious. There are ways in which to cut the time and shorten it, and I'll try and go over some of those tips for you all as we go through this project. So let's go to Create New, 1920 by 1080. And when we open it up, I want to have as much access to the layers as possible. So I'll come up here. I've already turned off properties. You might have that on, so I've turned off properties. And then I'm going to go down to timeline, turn that on. And it gives us the option to create video timeline. Yours might say create frame animation. I'm going to be showing you the timeline method. That's what I use, and I want you all to become familiar with. So make sure that you're creating a video timeline. So we hit that, and our timeline appears. I'm going to drag and drop my footage in. It's as easy as that. Now you can see this lasts about 10 seconds long. If we scrub through, we have our video footage. An alternative way of doing this is just going up to File, Open, go to your footage, hit Open, and here we go. We have a new file. It's already named for us, and if we scrub through, we've got our footage. So either one works. I'm gonna, we have to save as either way. I'm just going to go back to our first, and let's do File, Save As. And I want to save it in our Photoshop spot. and 1. So I want to talk a little bit first about frame rates. Right down here we can see it is set to 29.97 frames per second. If we play it back, it looks pretty smooth. If we come over here to this button, we can set the timeline frame rate. And if you're going to be, you should not really ever be animating at 29 frames per second. That's too much work for you to do. I personally like to animate sometimes at 12 or even 10 frames per second. If we set the option of 24 frames per second, that gives us the option to do doubles. Work on ones and twos. We can work on ones and twos if we set at 24 frames per second. And mostly you might be working on twos, and then every now and then you might go to a one. So that's a pretty good, that's a safe bet. If you know that you want to work entirely on twos, then you can just go to 12. So I'm going to go to 12. Now, when we play this back, we can tell it's a little bit more jerky. And we can see that it's the same amount of time. So when we're changing the frame rate, we aren't doing anything to the time. The computer is just slicing out the sections for the frame rate that we want. If we actually want to change the amount of time and say use all of these frames that's in this footage, but you use all of these frames as 10 frames per second, we're going to have to do something a little bit different. We'll have to use an image sequence, and we can do that in After Effects. And I'll show you how to do that. But right now, I just want you to know that the frame rate, whatever you set it as, it's not going to be adjusting the time at all. It's only going to be slicing out a particular number of frames to hit that frame rate that you have selected. I want to talk to you about something called video groups versus video layers. Some of you might have already animated in Photoshop a little bit, and you might have found it really tedious and unorganized and annoying. And that's because it doesn't really set it up for you to be working in a super efficient way, and you have to know how to do that. What you all might have been doing is you add a layer, you shorten it, we're going to zoom in, and you make some animation here on this layer. It's a different color. So we have a little bit of red there. And then you go over here and you add a new layer, and you can see up here, new layer added, and you have to go back over here and shorten it and move it over and move over here, and then you can make your circle, and so on and so forth, just adding all these layers. And honestly, it's super tedious. This whole timeline gets very unorganized. Eventually you have to start scrolling up and down, which is a pain. And we would just want to keep it more organized and more tight. So we need to create something called a video group, and there's a couple ways to do that. An easy way is just coming down to our layers that we have made, and I'm going to drag this down to the same layer, and we can see that layer has changed to video group. Same thing right here. Select this layer, drag it down, and now I just have all of these on the same layer, and we can see each one is separated into a frame, so we've got 3 frames here. Another way to make a video group, on any of these layers right here, we can click on this film icon and we can say new video group, and then if I hit layer, I'm going to come back here, shorten it down to 1 or 2 frames depending if I'm working on ones or twos, And then what I like to do is I just like to copy and paste Command C, Command V a lot of my layers. And so when we come over here and we look in our layers panel, how things are appearing versus video groups versus layers. So if I just have a blank layer, it's going to appear like this. We don't have it inside of the video group folder. If I have a video group, we can expand it and collapse it, and all of our layers are inside of here, which I think is the best option. So that's called video groups. There's also something else called video layers, which I use a little bit less, but they're still good. You can go up to layer, video layer, new blank video layer. And the difference between this and the video group is that all of my frames already exist here in video 11. And we can see up here there's also a difference. We have a film icon versus the video group folder. So what that means is here on my first frame, I'll draw a circle, and then I'll move to my next frame. So we're just drawing all in one layer. It is divided into separate frames, but we can't really see the separate frames. So that's why I actually prefer the video groups, because right here I can see where my frames are really easily versus up here. I mean, we know that they start like where all the frame markers are, but it's just more clear to me down here. And I can come down here, let's say if I want to make something last for 2 frames instead, real easy to do that, versus up here, it's a little bit more complicated. You have to go up to layer, video layers, duplicate frame, or insert blank frame, however you want to do it. So video groups and video layers, that's what you're going to be working in order to avoid the amount of stacking that usually happens in Photoshop. Okay, I'm going to come in and start tracing over my footage. Um, you can see right here, there's a few frames that like are sort of the same. The hand's more or less in the same place. And then once we get here is when it really starts to move. I'm gonna go maybe just 4 frames before where it starts to move. And I'm gonna start from there. So we're skipping 3 frames. That's really not cutting out that much work, but we're gonna have a place right here where we have a lot of time just here in the middle where it's the hand is pretty much just in the same position. So we're going to cut a little bit out of there too, using a method of just skipping frames, and then we're going to repeat 3 frames that we create and use that to create the duration of time that we want for the length. Just have 3 frames on loop whenever the hand's closed. So I'm going to grab my my paintbrush. And my first pass is just going to be the hand shape. Afterwards, I will go back and I'll make a second pass, and there will be any details that I want to add. And we're just going to fill this in. It's great to know the shortcuts, so if we want to get back to brush, we can hit B. And of course, G is the paint bucket. So that's helpful as well. So next frame, come in here, make sure we have our correct frame selected. And let's see how far we're going to go with this. So probably about right here is where I want to get to. I'm gonna stop the recording and go through all of those frames, and then we'll start it back up. So I have done my series of frames that I want to do, and it looks pretty good. But now I have this big chunk of time where the hand doesn't really move, and if we were to just continue to do frame after frame, that would be a lot of unnecessary time until about right before 5 seconds. So we want to create a loop that we can use of maybe like 3 or 4 frames and just repeat them over and over. What I'm going to do is I'll come back to here, adding a new layer, and then I'm going to turn on onion skin over here. And that's fine. So right here we can see the general sort of outline of our red paint layer that we have. I'm going to come in. I'm going to use a different color just to have a clearer distinction. I'll do blue. And I'm just going to paint over top. I want to paint over top of the red that I have, which is generally, I mean, the exact same as where the hand is. And what we can't do is we can't just extend this to about where we're going to end, because if we hit play, we can see it sort of has this shake with it, and then all of a sudden it would just stop to completely still, which would be it would be a little bit weird. So we want to create a small loop. I'll go back. I'll shorten that. Let's do another one. Do it again with blue. All right. So now I'm gonna turn off onion skins, and I'm gonna shift select these 4 frames, Command C, Command V, and they'll just get copied right behind. I'm gonna keep doing that until about right there. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so it did something that I wasn't expecting. It moved it over when we did the Command C, Command V, which is unfortunate. But we can fix that. So I'm just going back to onion skins, shift selected all of them, and I guess it doesn't, we can't see the onion skins when we move it, but general same area. That looks like it could be okay. Let's hit playback. And we can come in here later and make a few adjustments if we want to, but that's pretty good for right now. Now I'm going to come back and add a new layer, switch back to red, and I'm going to just finish the end section of it. And I changed the color so that we can know what section is the looping section that we repeat the frames over and over, and what frame is the non-looping section. Later on in After Effects, we are going to just add a fill So it's going to get rid of the individual colors, and it's going to change the hand to one solid color. So again, I'm gonna stop the recording, and I'm just gonna finish this until about right here. I'll do my same looping animation again, probably a little bit from like right here to maybe an extra second or so that we can have some footage at the end before it goes back. Um, if we want, we can also try and create a full loop. So whenever we get to here in this section, I'm gonna grab this frame way back here, right here, and I'm gonna bring it over here, and I'm gonna make it transition from wherever I'm at to that frame that I had there, so that we can have a loop that will just repeat over and over with the hand opening and closing. We're gonna try and make the end a bit smoother. So if we come here and we loop it, let's see how it looks. And it doesn't look that bad at all. We can see a little bit of a jump, but it's not bad. And when you loop, it's a little bit counterintuitive, but where this end marker is, it needs to be at the, like, right here at the start of that frame. That way it includes this frame. If I moved it here, it would also include this frame. We don't want that. So we're just gonna have it there. And so what I want to do, how I want to help it make it loop, is I'm going to grab my very first frame. I'm going to do Command C, Command V. We think that we would be able to do that, but whenever we do that, it actually if you remember the issue we had when we did the blue hands, it slightly pushed it over a little bit, so we can see my first frame, my second frame, which I just copied and pasted. It should be the exact same, but it shifted it a little bit. It shifted it to the center or just some other place. That's not what we want. We can't have that, because if we were to take this frame to the very end back here, we would be using this frame's position and not that frame's position. So I'm going to delete that frame. And what we do instead, we have to duplicate it. So duplicate layer, and now it's the exact same. I'm going to drag this out and move it all the way to the end. And of course, we also had that one extra frame. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that and move that to in front of my final frame so we can see both. So we're trying to move from here to there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do some in-between frames, tweening, maybe onion skins. And we can kind of see where I have started, which is this thumb right here, and I'm moving to this thumb. And I want to do one more. I want to do two more. I want to do one more before this in between and one more after. So come here. And so I also want to put one here. All right, not bad. Let's turn off onion skin, and let's. This is in the position that we want it to be, because this is the last frame we want to see. We don't want to see that frame when we loop it. Let's see how it looks. And it looks great. Perfect loop. Seamless. Seamless enough. Okay, so another section that is giving us a little bit of trouble is this blue section because we just repeated those frames over and over. We can start to see the repetition. All we really need to do when we come in here is zoom in a little. So we'll start at the first blue one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, so this would be 1. I'm just going to take what would be 2. I'm going to move it before 1. That's 1 and 2, 3 and 4. I'm going to take 4, move it before 3. And you really don't have to do this in any like systematic order. It can be a little random, just as long as you don't end up putting a 1 by a 1. But this will help break up your sequence a little bit so it doesn't look like quite as repetitive. Let's see, what does that look like? Looks okay. We can mix it up a little bit more maybe. We have done the base layer of the hand. And now we're going to go back and we're going to add the details, basically the shadowing, so that whenever the hand closes, we have distinction of where the fingers are. I'm going to close that down. I'm going to make a new video group. And unfortunately, we are going to have to do pretty much just the same number of frames again, around, what was it, 74? But it should go a little bit faster. I'm going to copy and paste. No. Copy and paste a bunch of those. Come to my hand, turn my video layer back on, and I'm going to take the opacity down on my video group. Let's rename this base and sorry, the lights, the sun is really bright where I am, and it's hard to type. And let's call this shadow. So in shadow hand, we'll go down to this layer. I'm going to grab a different color. I'll use purple. And right here, let's go to a smaller size. Let's do 10. I'll take you to the middle first, actually. What we're gonna do is just come in here and draw the separation between the fingers, the thumb, and the shading. However you want to add the detail, that's really up to you. This is more an artistic decision here. If you decided that you wanted to outline the entire hand, you're welcome to do that. I just do where the shading or the creases would be, the overlaps, and I make a distinction between here and the variation. You can go back over some areas if you want. you can see back here, there's really no overlap. So depends on what you want to add details to. Do you want to add details to wrinkles, to lines on the hand? That's your decision. You could add one here if you wanted to. I don't know, kind of your choice. But the more you add, of course, the more time it will take, the more details. I finished the shadows, and we'll go ahead and play the whole thing and see what it looks like. And for this blue section, I just did the same thing that I did with the blue base layer. I kind of just went in and I looped. I made a couple frames. I looped them and then I switched a few of the frames back and forth. I did have to go through some of these and make some adjustments just in here. Sometimes this thumb wasn't lining up quite how I wanted it to. For the most part, it does. That one spot is a little funky. So I might come down here and actually I might erase a little bit of the blue. But it looks pretty good.